man, talk about a pain in the ass. I mean, if you haven't thrown porcelain before, it's such a different type of clay. I mostly throw stoneware. I mean, I throw a lot of porcelain too from time to time, but it usually comes in phases. And it's usually for this exact reason, which is stoneware has a lot of strength to it. It does the things that you want, especially for larger forms. It just requires sort of relearning how to work with clay because it's just so different. It's such a fine and plastic type clay that it has a new set of challenges that come with it. And it's sort of evidenced by some of the failures that I had. And so it was a lot of fun making this video. When I went into it, I knew it was going to be a struggle because the sphere is such a challenging shape to make on its own. And not having the strength and knowing that I really had to kind of work within the limits of the porcelain clay, this was going to be a little bit of a challenge. And so luckily I got some fun footage there, losing a few pieces and learning a few things. And it was funny because by the time I got to my third piece, I was able to throw it twice as fast and kind of fix some of the mistakes that I was really having. So those mistakes I'll kind of share with you as we kind of watch as I'm throwing through this. And so typically when I'm throwing, I usually like to throw tall. Usually that's how you get the size and shape that you want. You go very vertical, you're making a large cylinder and then you're shaping it, and then typically that cylinder will sort of drop and fall into the shape that you're working with. And that's a little bit different when working with the porcelain because it doesn't have the strength in the same way that stoneware does to sort of handle that. So I really had to focus on finishing different parts of the pot at different times. And what I mean by that is when I was throwing most of the cylinder, I was intentionally saving the bottom third that's really supporting all of the weight, and I was saving that till last. And so I was doing a little bit of shaping, but then I was finding myself working on that top half and really just focusing on giving it the form and shape. And you kind of have to do that. That really goes for kind of any piece or large size. You have to think about like, hey, this thing's kind of a skyscraper and the base needs to be really strong and solid. So if you thin it out too much, it's just going to collapse on you. And that's what was happening in some of my earlier pieces. But ultimately we ended up figuring it out, and kind of coming back and working with the top was really the way to approach this. And there's another element here too that's coming up, which is giving the clay time to rest, and you need to give it a little bit of time to dry and sort of settle. So I really took the piece about as far as I could to about 75%, really focusing on sort of the form and shape, knowing that I would have to take that last 25% of the shape, as it sort of finishes. So here you see the transition where I was able to let it dry. And that's pretty typical for these types of shapes in these larger pots, that you have to sort of let the clay rest, let it dry just a little bit, because it needs that strength. That if it's really wet and saturated, you can't work with that clay very well, or it's going to collapse on you. And so that was really what I was after here, was making sure that I was going to let the clay rest. And ultimately I let it sit for probably about an hour or two. It's December, the humidity is relatively low in the air, so things dry a little bit faster. And so I found that about an hour or two, and was able to come back to it, and it felt pretty stiff, but yet still had some plasticity to it. I mean, it wasn't, it was nowhere near leather hard, but enough to make me comfortable going and finishing some additional shaping. And so that's really what I ended up doing, was just kind of doing some additional rib work and getting the final shape that I was after. Ultimately turned out pretty well. So it's always fun to try coming back to things. I'm going to be doing more of a porcelain run in the future, shifting gears. 2022 is really the year of stoneware for us, and kind of miss throwing porcelain, and want to do some new things with celadons and stuff in the future. So you'll be seeing more porcelain here in the near future. So as always, thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this. It was a lot of fun to make. And as always, if you guys have any questions or are interested in some of the things that I'm working on, leave a like, leave a comment, let me know what you'd like to see, and hopefully we can make that happen. So as always, thanks for watching.